It was a hot summer day, and my mom took my siblings and I to play in a stream at a park where people went for walks or for fishing. It was very isolated though, and there was hardly ever anyone around. My siblings and I were enjoying splashing in the water, and we even caught a few fish. Everything was going great, and we come here quite often. Until, off in the distance, we heard a twig break, and we see these 3 guys coming towards us. We thought they were going for a walk, or maybe wanted to go fishing, so we didn't pay much attention to them. We continued what we were doing, and then eventually they started coming closer to us. They started circling in around us, and just standing there, staring at us. My mom started to become worried, and us kids were confused as to why they kept staring and slowly coming closer. They all looked at each other in a creepy way, and then continued surrounding us. My mom then grabbed us kids and told us to run, so the 4 of us ran away as fast as we could back to our car. I turned around to see what the guys were doing, and they were walking away now. Once we got to the car, my mom sped away, and then I realized what was going on. The guys probably wanted to do something to us, and since my dad wasn't there with us, it made us an easy target. My mom, my siblings, and I never went back there again. And if we hadn't run away, I don't know what would have happened to us. I thought this would be interesting to share. This happened around the time I was in middle school. I'm an only child and just lived with my dad. My dad would have to go to work early in the mornings, so he would drop me off every weekday around 5 a.m. at my grandmother's house. I would go inside, go to her room, sleep for a little bit more on her bed until I had to wake up for school. For better context, the house she lived in was a typical 1-story house. Nothing fancy, but there was always something off about that place. I had odd things happen, like bathroom door being wide open for a while and then just slammed shut, or hearing from a relative a spooky thing they saw while passing by a room. A dark shadow of a man sitting on the edge of the bed. I personally never seen this figure, but maybe he was the cause of this eerie memory. So it's 5 a.m. I enter the house like always and go to her room. My grandma was still asleep and did not hear me come in. My grandma had a single small bed that was by the wall. I always slept opposite from her, so my head was by her feet. I climbed into bed, and not 1 minute of me lying down, closing my eyes, I heard the door open, and heard someone walk really fast, and stop right by the bed. I felt someone, or something, stare at me. I could feel the presence so heavily, and that stare. I will never forget the feeling that stare gave me. I was frozen and completely horrified. I knew that thing, or person, or whatever it was standing right by the bed and just staring at me. I dared not turn around. I kept my eyes tightly closed and clutched the blanket. Minutes felt like hours before finally I heard this thing walk off out of the room and close the door. I'm glad I never turned around to see whatever that thing or whoever that person was. I can't imagine what I would have been faced with. The year was 1999. I was going to be 11 years old that fall. It was summertime, and for Christmas, my parents had gotten me this cool blue and black boombox. It was awesome. I started listening to the music on my own and getting CDs from friends.
I had used money I had earned to buy some CDs from Coconuts, which was before FYE. I could be wrong, but that's where I got music. I had brought my boombox with me to my dad's friend's house and put some D batteries in it, and we listened to the radio. A bunch of kids and I swam and whatever. My dad's friend Dave, who lived 10 minutes away in the country, built a house and had an in-ground pool. I mentioned my dad in my previous posts about how he was a drunk and such. This isn't any different. My dad got sloppy drunk at this party, and I was good friends with Dave's son, Scott, so I talked him into spending the night with us, and he was on board. Scott was a few years older than me, and he was cool. He grabbed some CDs, and my dad drove us home, blitzed out of his mind. My dad drove a Robin's Egg blue Chevy at the time, and Scott and I were in the back of this truck with my boombox. This is when I heard Limp Bizkit, Korn, and Godsmack for the first time, as Scott wasn't interested in my Blink-182 albums. So we were driving through backcountry roads, which are all now developed subdivision neighborhoods, and there are hardly any streetlights anywhere. It's summertime, and we are rocking out to Limp Bizkit. My dad approaches a four-way intersection. There are no lights anywhere, except his headlights. One car passes, and Scott starts telling me what light pollution is, as it was a factory/plant not far away from where we were. We also had no idea my dad passed out in park at the stop sign. We sat there, and this flash of orange light lit up the whole street. We looked up, and there was a large circular orange light above us. You could make out a V-shape outline, and smaller light, yellowish, orange-tinged, cream-colored lights on the wings. It was high above us at first, but then was maybe 80 feet above us at one point. It sat there making no noise, as the boombox kept playing, and as soon as Scott looked at me, he started yelling, "That's an effing UFO!" I started yelling, "Woo!" like Ric Flair. It was something I'd never seen before, and I never shared an experience like that with anyone. Our screaming woke up my dad, who saw the craft as well, and he peeled out. It kept pace with us for a bit, before ascending up and flying away, out of sight. We couldn't sleep that night. We drank soda, watched some wrestling, and surfed the web looking at UFOs. My dad asked us about it in the morning, and asked us what we saw. He told us to keep it to ourselves because he saw something once when he was our age, and no one believed him. And that was something that he remembered being very painful, because his brothers never let him forget about it. When I was still married to my military husband, he was overseas, and I moved my daughters and myself to our follow on-duty station. I rented a 100-plus-year-old house. It was wonderful, out in a rural area with a huge yard. The only problem was it had mysterious happenings. One of the things that I soon learned happened on a regular basis was the knocker. The basement of the house was very dark and damp. My washer and dryer and deep freeze were in the basement, so I had to go down there quite often. I never allowed my 2 young children down due to the darkness and dampness. The only entrance to the basement was a door located in the kitchen. It happened to be right next to the back door, which was also in the kitchen. Not long after we moved in, I heard a knocking on the back door. Thinking it must be a neighbor, I went to answer it. As I approached the door, I realized it wasn't the back door. It was the basement door. I knew my children were in the living room, so I couldn't figure out who might be in my basement. I opened the door, and no one was there. This occurred on a regular basis, at least once a week. I heard the knocker. The neighbors and owner of the home knew nothing about it. I also hung a photo of my husband up on the wall by the front door. Many, many mornings, I came in to find it either hanging upside down or lying on the floor beneath one of the chairs or the sofa. I would replace the photo and leave it at that. My parents came to visit one weekend. We were sitting in the living room. and suddenly we hear knocking on the back door. I tried to ignore it, but my very practical mother insisted on answering the door. I followed her to the door, insisting she just ignore it. She thought it was terribly rude, so then she opened the door. Realizing there was no one there, she literally stalked back to the living room, picked up her purse, and as she was going out the door, said, "Mel, I'll be in the car." My father drove her the 3 hours home, and she refused to ever come back. Another time, after my husband returned from overseas, we had guests and were sitting in the living room. Suddenly, my husband stopped talking and was staring at the wall next to the front door. He said, "Susan, get the baby. It's time to go home." We followed his stare to the front door and watched as the photo of my husband and myself was slowly turning upside down. There were other strange occurrences, and it soon became apparent that whatever it was in that house did not like my husband at all. If he upset me or the children in any way, things picked up and something bad happened to him. One day, following an argument, he left to drive to a local Kmart. He called me from the store. He was almost in the store when the left driver's side rear wheel came off the truck, and he wrecked the truck. He apologized to me. He called the entity Hardy. It followed us to our next base and left when we divorced. Honestly, this is my first time making a Reddit post. I read them all the time, but I just need to get what happened to me out. I'm 18 years old. I've been in the same house my entire life. My parents lived here years before I was born. There's been a couple of incidences in our house. It's very old. Some of these incidences include people either seeing things or feeling weird sometimes. But this story takes place when I was about 6 years old. Honestly, I couldn't tell you if it was something I made up in my brain as a child, or if what happened to me is real. It started one night. Both of my parents were home, and I woke up to people talking to me. When I told them to be quiet, they wouldn't, and they started yelling. So I started screaming. My mom and dad came into my room and asked me what was going on. I told them about the people, and they checked my whole room, and they didn't see anything. But I swear I can still see those people's faces. It wasn't one or two, but more like 10 or 15 just standing in my room yelling at me. Because of my parents' jobs, I would often have a babysitter. I was very close with her, but I never wanted her to go into my room, because I didn't want her to know about the people. One day, I had had a terrible day, and I walked into my room. I swear they started talking to me. My babysitter came into my room because she heard me screaming. She came in, and on my bed, honestly, this part I don't remember, but my mom told me this recently. I looked her right in the eyes and said, "They don't like it when you sit on my bed," and then turned around and went to sleep. She quit the next day. Apparently, nothing happened after that until 2 weeks ago. My best friend practically lives at our house, and we are both into very spiritual stuff. I hadn't told her about what happened to me as a kid, and me and her were talking, and she was talking about one of the first times she'd ever been to my house. She swears she saw people in my room. She said that they were watching me sleep. And when she said that, all the memories came back. I haven't been able to sleep in my room ever since. I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm going crazy. Does anyone have any advice on what I should do? I asked my friend if I could post her story, and she agreed. This happened in early lockdown. I copied from her. Here it is. Enjoy. There is no doubt that we are in a somewhat peculiar situation these days. Quarantines, full isolation, and generally strict calls to stay at home have become our new everyday life. The streets are empty, public transportation runs almost empty carriages, and what is left is a purely visual society devoid of people. Unfortunately, people with dubious intentions can use this to their advantage. At midnight yesterday, I was on my way home, alone. As I get on the bus and sit down, I almost immediately register a man on the other side where I am sitting who takes an interest in me. Very clear interest. He fixes his gaze firmly on me. Almost the entire way. I gradually start to get a little uncomfortable, and on a couple of occasions, allow myself to let my eyes wander, accidentally, across the bus to confirm to myself that I am indeed being watched. Not only does his behavior worry me at this point, but also his appearance in general, where he sits, wearing a large outer jacket with the hood pulled down on his head, and with a clear focus on hiding the lower part of his face with the help of the neck jacket. Similar to the function to a type of Finnish cap. Back was only the sight of two big, dark and intense eyes that wouldn't leave me alone. We then get to the point where I have to change from bus to subway. He follows. I make a few random, small stops here and there to check departures with the intention of watching his movements, of which he stops expectantly. He then follows me down onto the platform, where he clearly stands and watches me from a distance. I'm now waiting for the train, and I'm beginning to feel the fear that he will follow me all the way to the end station, where I'm going to get off, alone. First, the train line 2 arrives, and I decide to get into one of the carriages to give the impression that I am going that way, then get off again before the doors close for departure. Both to mislead the man, but also to get confirmation to myself that he is indeed after me, that it's not just me being paranoid. Once again, the suspicion is confirmed. He gets into the carriage, but when he turns around and sees that I have gotten off again, he also gets off and stands back on the platform. Now the anxiety really starts to kick in. Finally, the line 4 arrives, and I stand a bit, waiting before I go on, then strategically slip in the second the doors close. He does the same. I then sit down in the front seat in the front carriage, with my back to the cab, to make sure that he has no opportunity to move behind me, where I then sit with a full view of the entire carriage. Unsurprisingly, he walks towards me and sits in the seats directly in front of me, leans back with his arm resting over the back of the seats, and fixes his gaze on me, occasionally interrupted by him standing up and pacing a little restlessly back and forth, but then just to sit down again. I feel my heart pounding away, and then my breathing becomes harder to keep in check. Nevertheless, I try my best to appear unaffected by it all, as I don't want him to see that I'm scared. But at the same time, it's becoming more and more challenging for me to keep a cool head and think clearly. A little beyond us sits another, slightly younger boy. I hope with everything that I have that he will be with the train all the way to the terminus, so that I don't have to get off alone with the man who follows me, and can then ask to be accompanied home. There are now only the 3 of us left on the track, and as I feared most at this point, this other guy is starting to get ready to get off at the next stop, 2 stops before mine. Now the adrenaline really kicks in, and I realize that I should act fast, as after all, I have no idea what this mildly questionable man's intentions actually are.
It ends with me sitting completely still in the seat, then jumping up and sprinting out of the carriage on the station, just as the doors close. Taking a quick glance behind me as I run away, I see that this man is clearly also in a hurry to get off, but luckily, he doesn't have time before the train moves on. From here, I then run the whole distance home in fear of meeting him on the way, as there are short distances between the last two stops. And here, obviously the adrenaline did me a big favor, since my fitness these days is as absent as toilet paper on the store shelves. I luckily make it home safely, albeit somewhat emotionally frayed, and quickly agree with myself that I will never again go out alone in the evening these days, and I want to give that call to you other girls out there too.
One night, me and my friends were playing some hide and seek in our hometown. We were probably like 13 or so at the time. I went into a small area that is basically like a shortcut from the main road to the side road. Unfortunately, I went alone, and I didn't even think of what could happen. Remember, we were only 13 at that time. We didn't bring phones with us, so if something happened to us, nobody would even know. So the game started, and I ran sprinting into the woods area. Everything was fine for the first 30 seconds. As a disclaimer, I should say we have a rule. We have to come to the checkpoint where we start, and we have to save ourselves from not getting picked to search. After about a minute, I start hearing footsteps. I say, "Hello? Are you one of my friends?" And something that was there, whatever it was, didn't say anything. So I started backing out. Fortunately, the woods area has a main route and two sides, so I could have run either way. I started backing out, and from nowhere, this man just appears from the woods and starts sprinting at me while saying, "I'm gonna get you," in a creepy and eerie way, kind of like a kidnapper. Fortunately, I train football, soccer as some of you might know it, so I knew I can definitely outrun him, or at least make him tired. I sprinted all the way through the woods, with the only light being the moonlight, and after about 2 minutes, he gave up. I continued sprinting and got myself all the way to the checkpoint, and told all my friends what had just happened. But of course, no one believed me. But I didn't care, since I knew it was all real. To this day, I still don't know who or what had tried to catch me that night. But I know one thing for sure. If I wasn't a sports guy, the outcome would be very, very different.
I'm new to this subreddit, and goddamn, are some of these stories scary. But today, I'm sharing my own. I just got home from the store when I noticed my door was unlocked. Weird, I thought. I had never forgot to lock my door before, but I ignored it. That was my biggest mistake. I walked into my house and noticed the carpet next to my door crumpled. It also had muddy footprints on it. And this is when I started to panic. Stupidly, I started to check the house just to find more muddy footprints and blood. A trail of it. I was frozen in fear, but I quickly snapped out of it when I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. I quickly hid in the cabinet and started dialing the police. I was shaking so much and was on the brink of crying Nevertheless, I explained my situation to the officer, stating the situation and my address. If I didn't do that, I don't think I would be here to tell this story. Just as I was talking to the officer, the cabinet door flew open. God, I screamed so loud, I went deaf for a second. The person who opened the door, a hairy, old, homeless man with a large, bloody cut on his face, looked startled as I screamed my lungs out. He quickly ran out before I could see him. I don't really know what happened next. All I remember is that the police came and watched my house all night. What truly scares me, though, is that they never found that man. His bloody face still haunts me to this day. It is currently night, around midnight. I'm at my grandma's holiday house alone after the rest of my family has already gone to each of their beds. I can't sleep, so I decided to stay on my phone in the living room, all by myself. It's nice having some quiet following a full day of family interactions. But after an hour or so, I've decided I've had enough of that and I need to start getting ready to sleep. Before heading to my upstairs room, I go to the kitchen to grab a glass of water. I don't want to have to go back down to the dark, empty house in the middle of the night. But as I set my foot inside the still dark kitchen, I glance through the window to see an even darker backyard. I don't think I've ever been paralyzed by fear before. It's like you forget you are allowed to walk, run, or even breathe. My body is just stiff to the now pair of glowing yellow eyes looking right into my soul. What shocks me is the fact that these yellow eyes are about 3 meters high, making whatever that thing is that had those eyes enormous. I'm just there frozen for a good 5 seconds, eyes locked with whatever that thing is staring at me. While my brain keeps repeating to myself, "You're seeing things. There isn't anything out there." When I'm finally able to move again, I decide to turn the lights on, but the eyes are still there. I quickly turn them off again to confirm what I was seeing. Yep, still there. Add a second strike to bring light to the kitchen. I now see there is a little bit more to the eyes. It's like a box-shaped thing. Almost like the goddamn water filter. I then realized what I was seeing the whole time was the reflection of the cold and room temp meters for the water filter. I feel incredibly stupid. I grab my water and go straight to my room. I don't think I've ever had a scare like this one, so thought I'd share. It's funny how our brains can play tricks on us. This isn't really a scary story, but it was scary for me in the moment. This just happened about 30 minutes ago, and I'm still creeped out by it. Let me start off by saying that I am a 15-year-old female, so I go everywhere with my mom. The day started normal. I woke up and went downstairs to my living room to play a game with my sister. We played for about 30 minutes when my older sister came downstairs as well to get ready to go to a movie with her boyfriend. I love to go on car rides everywhere, as long as I have my headphones. I get up from the couch to get ready to go. Fast forward to after we dropped her and her boyfriend off at the movies. My mom told me we were stopping at the library to bring some books back, and I asked her if I could go inside to get a book. Inside the library is a teen room where there are a bunch of books for teenagers. I walk over to the teen area to find a book, but there are already some people in there, and I didn't want to go in there while they were there, because it would have been awkward. I looked around the room for some books while I waited for the other people to get out so that I could go in. After a few minutes of waiting, they all finally got up and left, so I entered the room. I was in the room by myself for a good 10 minutes, trying to find a good book to read, when suddenly I had this feeling to turn around, and when I did, my stomach dropped. I saw this, what I am guessing is a 16 to 18-year-old man watching me, and not even trying to look for a book. Just watching, as I was trying to find my book. As soon as he noticed me looking at him, he immediately turned around and left the room. I don't know how long he was there watching me, but it made me feel really uneasy. What freaked me out most was I never even heard him enter or leave the room. And the door to the room is really loud. I stayed in the room a few minutes longer, still trying to find a book, but I just kept getting this feeling to turn around, and every time I did, I would see him looking at me. Every time he would notice me seeing him, he would turn around and walk away fast, and getting closer to the room again. I just got uncomfortable at that point, and grabbed a random book and ran to my mom. After we checked out, we walked outside to the car, and I never saw the man ever again. I am still creeped out by this while I write this. But to the man that was watching me while I was looking for a book, let's not meet again. First part of this story got deleted, so I'm going to shorten it. Basically, a summer camp me and my friend started to attend in 2019 does surveys every summer based on the topic we'll be discussing, so we get better at public speaking and a more generalized opinion from others in the area. Me and my friend teamed up with 2 counselors and hit the town. Our last stop was a Walmart. We talked to a bunch of different people. The most memorable was the second to last, an older man that asked for our names and all about us after he finished answering our questions. At the time, we were both 13, with hardly any concept of stranger danger, so we gladly answered about ourselves. Anyway, a few days later, an account popped up on our friend requests called Ed_Patisse. The account liked a bunch of old posts, commented a bunch of fire and rose emojis, and called us hot and sexy on our posts. It got to the point where they started to send dick pics, so me and my friend ended up blocking the account. Only a few days later, the account was permanently deleted. Didn't show up in our searches for it. That's why we thought it was the end of it. It wasn't. When we finally got back to school in August, we basically forgot the event altogether. Yet, again, this time on both of our Facebook accounts, we got a notice from someone named Ed Patisse, wanting to be our friend. Immediately blocked that account again, but not before they had already commented lewd things on my baby pictures. Commented on how pretty my baby blonde hair was, how I looked good in short dresses, etc. After that, we both talked to our parents about the situation. And other than keeping our accounts private, there wasn't much else we could really do. The cops shrugged and said to just take the app down completely. But hey, we were teens, so of course we didn't do that. Over the years, till the end of 2021, this man kept sending friend requests from different accounts with similar variations of the name, which was a bit stupid, but whatever. Though, at the beginning of 2022, this is where it starts to get really creepy. Accounts with the names and pictures of our friends started showing up in our notifications. So obviously, we added them, thinking it was our friends. We were wrong. Almost immediately, most of our posts had likes or comments on them from this account, and there were multiple DMs of dick pics to both of us. We blocked the account again. This became a reoccurring cycle. An account with friends' info, pictures, and mutual friends would get hacked, stolen, duplicated, etc., just so that they could friend us again and again, without us worrying too much about it. Finally, it got to the point we stopped adding people from our school at all, even friends. The final time this happened was in summer of 2022. 2022. The swarm of fake accounts had stopped roughly 2 months prior. Seeing as this friend request looked legit by a school friend, I decided to try it out. My friend didn't. She was still wary, but I decided to give it a shot. The compromise was to fully delete our socials and get new ones if this account turned out the same. I was definitely a stupid 17-year-old, but try not to judge me too harshly. This account didn't spam our pictures, didn't DM us dick pics, just interacted with us like any normal school kid would. A like here and there on some of our new posts, a like on a story posted, never commented on posts. So finally we thought it was over. Wrong. Strange things started to happen, and become more of an intentional thing than a coincidence. I would post a picture of me and a friend at the park. A couple of minutes later, a white truck pulled up in the lot, eerily close to my car's driver's side door. But we tried not to think too much of it. They were still a few spaces over. Me and my friend were on the swings, basically a straight line of sight to the parking lot. The truck lights remained on, pointed at us, for a long time. It got to the point that me and my friend finally started to get worried and anxious, so we hopped up from the swings and decided to take laps around the park instead. The car was far too close to mine for us to be comfortable chancing it to get in time. Mind you, it was about 10 p.m. at night, so we were the only ones there. We waited and roamed the park for nearly an hour before the truck finally drove away. That's when we raced to my car, and I drove home, looking behind me frequently just in case. This happened in early June, and it kept happening. I didn't really notice it though. I thought it was a one-off occurrence. It never dawned in my head that it had happened after I posted the profile pictures, or said where I was with friends. But I started to see a white truck just about anywhere I posted about. Even one that would wait outside my high school when I posted a story about my walk to my mom's store only a mile from our school. Again, young and dumb, I didn't think the worst of it. I thought it was a parent waiting for a kid. Plus there is a bunch of people that own all kinds of variations of white trucks in my town, so I never put much worry into seeing them all the time. My friend never mentioned any white truck, and if we were together, we rarely saw any of them. But I started to get nervous of them after one time I was walking to my mom's store. I decided to take a glance at the driver of the truck that sat near the car line every day after school. It was the same, if not a little bit older, man from our Walmart survey trip of 2019. It was bizarre. Definitely we never expected to see him again, especially since we met him in a few towns over from our own town. Yet, lo and behold, he was right there. That's when I walked, probably ran actually, to my mom's store. This kept happening and I finally knew I was being stalked after seeing him that first time, because I saw him everywhere on foot. Anyway, this post is getting long, so I'll fast forward to the last bit that happened on the last day of our shared summer camp in late July 2023. At this point, I was still 17, and since I was older than most of the new campers, I might as well have been considered a staff member. I drove kids to camp and home every night, and they paid me for the gas money. So, I was cool doing it. Didn't bother me. Since they were in the same town as me, and there was others further away, the counselors typically drove them home. This day, I posted all the last day campfire pictures right before I left, so I could try and save my phone that was suffering from glitches, lack of data, and didn't let me communicate or call others because my storage was so full. So I photo dumped a bunch of stuff, but it didn't fix the problem. My phone was essentially broken in all but name. It hardly worked, and I bought my current phone after this occurrence. On top of this, one of the older campers that visited on the last day didn't have a phone either, but he was in the car with me. In the back seat, I had 3 campers. One didn't have a phone either, and the other 2 were dead. One was charging theirs in my carport, but we didn't think much of it. Just turned on the radio full blast and gunned it back home. As I pulled off the back road of our camp, up to the intersection, the light turned green, and we went forward. In the lane next to us, a white truck that kept turning its lights on and off. It was a bit weird, so I sped up, but of course I didn't think much of it. Side note, my best friend, let's call her Anne for this, has a baby. Anne had her kid at 16, so at this point her kid was nearly a year old. Still very fussy in car rides and such. This becomes important later, because Anne was there for the last days of camp too. She left right before we did, when her baby became cranky. Eventually, I don't see the white truck behind me anymore, and I slow down a bit. It was nearly 9:30 p.m. at this point, late enough for the highway between our towns to be essentially empty. I have this back road that is a bit curvy that leads close to my house and directly to a rich neighborhood. It's streets I typically take to get back to my house from camp if I had no one to take home. It's streets I typically take to get back to my house from camp if I had no one to take home, and everyone that was a regular in my car called it the detour. It was quite pretty, with a bunch of full evergreen trees and wildlife. The kids, well, not really kids, but they acted like it, in the back were begging me to go on the detour, since it was the last day of camp. So I caved in, and I hit on my blinker, turning right onto the back road. Now listen, I'm not the safest person out there, so don't judge me. I'm still basically a kid too, but all the ones in the back loved to hang out the windows on the back road, so I let them stick their heads out of the sunroof, sit on the windowsill while holding the bars on the top of my car. I went slow, under 10 miles per hour, just so that they could do it and I not worry about them getting hurt. I mean, there was no one on the back roads. Cops never camped out there on those streets, and I was going under the speed limit by like 20, so there wasn't really any harm in letting them stick out the windows. Eventually, I let them bully me into taking them around the rich neighborhoods that had cool water fountains and covered bridges on the streets. Apparently, one of the covered bridges caved in, so we had to go around on this super narrow street right next to the large drainage ditch, at least 15 to 20 feet deep. As we were going around it, a car comes up behind us. I assumed it was one of the people who lived in the neighborhood, so I was going to speed up to let them get to their house. Finally, we came to the 4-way stop of the rich people street. Straight forward was a dead end, which is what I was originally going to do. To the left was the broken covered bridge. To the right was a back roundabout that would take us back to the beginning of the street, but it had no houses or lights back there because the neighborhood is still being built. But, let's call him Jake, told me to go right. Mind you, one of the campers was sticking their body out of the skylight from the back seat, so I couldn't see out my rearview mirror. I didn't really want to, but I trusted his instincts and I turned right. As soon as I did, I started to hear honking behind me. I was a bit startled, and so were the kids in the back seat. I glance out my side view mirrors, but I can't see anything past the bright LED lights. I thought it was just because I took too long, so I sped up a bit after I turned right. There was a hook at the end of a hill on this back street, and it makes you tug the steering wheel pretty hard to stay on the road, especially in the dark. The car behind me turned right too. They started flashing their LED lights, honking loudly, and had rolled down windows screaming at us. They kept trying to get in the lane next to us and to bump into my car to run us off the road. That is when I knew this was very serious. Instantly, I started screaming at the kids in the back seat to sit down, buckle up, and roll up their windows. They barely managed to do that by the time I hit the bend at the end of the hill really hard and gunned it off the street, diving around the drainage ditch with little problem. I've done it multiple times. There was no phone in the car to call anyone, least of all the police. So I just ended up speeding down the back streets as the car chased me, trying to get me off the road multiple times. When we came upon sharp corners, they slowed down. That told me they didn't know the area well, which I used to my advantage. As I was approaching a stop sign, for me to go left or right, my house was to the right, so left it was. I yelled at Jake to check my right, because I'm not stopping for the sign. I sped past it. The car, this is about the time I noticed, it was a fucking white truck, tried to hit my bumper again, and I swerved into someone's yard. Grass was damaged the next day when I drove past it. I booked it down the street, hitting every turn as fast as possible, and eventually, I thought I lost the truck. I sped past my high school and onto the highway again, where we got off in the first place. I didn't see the truck behind us, and we were all still freaked out. I took a right to go on another main way, passed by a closed gas station on the way, very important in the moment. I stopped at a gas station and handed the kids in the back some cash for them to go get themselves a drink and snack to help them calm down. None of them were crying, thank God. The adrenaline junkies they were. They thought it was more exciting than anything. I told Jake to go watch them in the store and make sure they didn't do anything stupid while I filled up my gas tank. We waited at the gas station for about 20 minutes before I went back onto the road to take them home, just in case. I asked them if they had seen the car at all while they were hanging out the windows, and only one of them said that they did, but the truck's lights were off. It was the same truck from a town or so over, from the intersection in front of the back road to our camp. They followed us for nearly 25 minutes. After I dropped all of them off, I was still a little bit shaky and decided to try and see if my phone would call someone that I could talk to about what happened. The only contact that would load was Anne, since she was the last person I had talked to on our phones. With a stroke of luck, my phone actually let me call. She picked up, but all I could hear from her side of the line was her crying. Obviously panicking, I asked her what was wrong, and lo and behold, she shares a story eerily similar to what just happened to me. Apparently, Anne's baby started crying so loud she could barely focus on the road, so she pulled into the closed gas station I mentioned earlier, right outside of our high school. I sped past. She was giving her kid their bottle when a white truck pulled into the lot. Immediately she was wary because it was closed, and she was right. Less than 30 seconds later, this truck parked horizontally in front of Anne's car to block her in. She immediately started the car again, locked the doors, and pulled off over the grass curb, blocking her from the street. She was not chancing her baby at all. Anne told me that the only thing she remembered was the man that we had seen a few years ago in that Walmart, his eyes staring at her like she was just a piece of meat for him to have. As she raced home, the truck caught up to her. She turned on her back road, running out of gas, and the truck started to flash its lights, honk, and run her off the road the entire time. But a couple of streets before hers, a little red car pulled out in front of her and started to brake check her as the white truck tried to hit her from behind. It was a mess. She took a chance, sped up, and swung onto her street to at least lose the red car. The truck booked it after her. Apparently, both of her older brothers were waiting outside for her, with some of their friends to help her bring in stuff for her baby. Upon seeing this as she pulled into her driveway, the white truck sped off. If her brothers weren't outside, that might have been a different story. But, anyway, long story short, The truck that follows me all the way back had an accomplice in a red car that followed my friend Anne. When they couldn't catch me, they went for her. Both me and Jake suspected that, because I didn't go into the dead end where the man could cut me off. That's why it suddenly got violent so quick. Edit. I never mentioned what happened after this, but the man in the white truck and the other in the little red car were found a town over when there was footage taken of them attempting to kidnap a 7-year-old off a porch and being attacked by their dog. Along with this, we found that there had been several sightings of a white truck around our town following others, doing similar things just days after it happened to us, following cars that had a similar description to mine and my friend's cars. Our reports were officially filed after we saw the information of the car on Facebook, along with the identity of the man that had stalked us for years. It had taken years to get rid of them, but now we don't have to worry about those men anymore.